Because when you start talking about fighting wars, you're talking about the use of weapon systems which do not allow you to come out alive.
That's right.
In a war. So therefore, now the time has come that we're going to have to really realize the intention of our Constitution. We're going to stop trying to dictate things, trying to take power. We're going to cooperate with other nations, but as sovereign nations in their own right. We're going to cooperate. The greatest thing that threatens us today is a threat from in space, from asteroids, from comets, and so forth.
Well, that's right. We're always focusing on just the planet. What about the whole universe around us?
Mankind has reached the point that we are actually now going to establish on the interplanet system, or part of the interplanet system, which is habitable and approachable. We are going to find ourselves running a certain part of the solar system, which is going to be the solar systems where man lives. Now, we're not going to go into Mars right away to live there as human beings, but we are in the process of two things. One, Mars is now an area in which mankind is going to build up systems and begin to work with that planet as a planet to deal with some of our problems. We're going to do the same thing in other cases. So we are now at a point where we're going to defend mankind in this section of the solar system. We're going to mobilize...
Amazing. Lyndon LaRouche, amazing. Thank you for the time. Right now, Chase customers see bank balance reduced to zero. Millions of Chase Bank customers are affected by an unfortunately timed glitch, which resulted in their checking and savings accounts showing a zero balance for several hours yesterday, prompting many to take to Twitter and express panic that their money had been stolen. All of this while the Cyprian crisis in Cyprus unfolded. They're now into day number 2 of their bank holiday, being told at least 10%. Now they're saying it could be higher of their money will be taken. The British headed up banks and German banks are also talking about 15% just off the top, on top of all the other taxes from the folks there in Italy. And of course, the average person pays over 70% taxes in France, and that's not enough. They want you to pay 75% on everything you keep after that. And then still there's not enough. And then everybody works for the government, and they live don't live too well, but that's just the way it is. And then you've got mega rich offshore who set this up, who get the lion's share of the money. And of course, it's always the ultra rich calling for more taxes. Just because they get it siphoned off to them, they get it in derivatives being backed up. It's just incredible. So here's that ABC News 7 report. Again, this is not in the national news, the Chase glitch. It was in one local ABC News affiliate, and now it's up at INFOWARS.com. Here's that report.
A nightmare tonight for Chase customers coast to coast. They go online to discover their checking account balances are showing zero. Efforts to correct the glitch began immediately, and Eyewitness News reporter John Hartung is live in Burbank now to tell us how things have turned out. John?
Well, Michelle, this is the second time in less than a week that Chase Bank has had some problems with their online banking, but this time it caused momentary panic for some of their customers who actually thought that someone had gotten into their accounts and swiped all of their money. Chase ATMs brought a sense of relief to many people tonight as the bank's customers were able to get cash in hand. For a couple hours, millions of customers across the country who use online and mobile banking saw their checking and savings accounts all with zero balances.
I just thought they were doing some kind of service on the accounts or something like that.
But quickly, Twitter feeds were set ablaze with comments of anger and frustration. One tweet reading, quote, "Chase got hacked, lost my 100K savings, I demand my money." Another tweet saying, quote, "Why are all my accounts wiped out? What's going on?" At Chase Support, at Chase News. The banking giant says the problem was an internal glitch. They issued a statement saying, quote, "We have a technology problem regarding customers' balance information. It has nothing to do with cyber threats. It is an internal issue. We are very sorry to our customers for the inconvenience. This began earlier this evening. It is not confined to the West Coast." By around 7:30 tonight Pacific time, the problem was fixed. It's a problem some Chase customers gladly didn't even know about.
If I didn't have a heart attack immediately, I'd probably call Chase. My concern would be not having that money available if I needed it that particular day. But I would feel confident that the bank or the government would step in if it was like a widespread thing.
Now, credit cards and mortgage accounts, they were not affected by tonight's glitch, which Chase Bank now says is completely fixed. They even went to Twitter tonight and said, quote, "We are back to business as usual," end quote. Live in Burbank, John Harting, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
Okay, John, thank you.
And that's ABC there in Southern California. Now, again, a glitch, you could lose all your money. And they could also steal your money and call it a glitch and then say you never get it back. This is how they could run a scam or claim that hackers had done it. And, $100 trillion worldwide, all the money in the world's disappeared once they get us on a global cashless system.
Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is March 20th, 2013. And here are your news updates for today. I am attaching the rest of George Noory's from 2 days ago, Coast to Coast. So you will be watching that later today. And about Planet X. I am doing a special on Nibiru. So hang tight. We're going to cover Nibiru tonight. An update. Alrighty then. The Extinction Protocol 2012 and beyond. If large asteroid is heading to Earth, pray is all we do, says NASA. NASA says we should pray. But then I thought NASA was full of satanic people. I don't understand. Pray to who? Alright, NASA, we'll pray. Because if you don't pay, then you have to pray, because they're upset that they didn't get refunded by the government. So there you go. Even though they did launch a rocket yesterday, and I did witness that, the whole place shook in the Space Coast. Alright. Suddenly, study warns a Nakai Trench earthquake would displace 10 million people in Japan and kill 323,000 people. 19 miners rescued in Poland after earthquake causes mine collapse. Indonesia's Mount Loken volcano unleashes 2,000-meter ash cloud. I'm sorry about yesterday. I said the 20th and it was only the 19th, but it was the 20th UTC time. Alrighty then. Moving on. The Watchers watching the world. Again, Mount Loken erupts with 2,000-meter high ash plume, Indonesia. I have learned by watching other YouTube videos that Yosemite, Yellowstone, is still under some type of red alert because they are past due for their eruption. So heads up on that. That is not a part of the Watchers, but I did see that on one of the other channels. Also, the storm of the century, 20th anniversary of most devastating storm ever recorded. Alrighty, I believe that's Sandy. Organic computers, scientists build interfaces for brain networks. Heads up on that. Alright, moving on. I'm doing a short show because I am attaching Coast to Coast, so enjoy that. It's all about Nibiru. Alright. Our second sun. Believe it or not, you can listen to the facts. Alright, E&E News. Energy News. Seawater and sand caused blackout at Fukushima Daiichi. Crucial power device left on back of vehicle. Exposed to the elements. Oh. I told you, they are incompetent people. We need to fire them all. Hire new scientists, or the whole world is endangered. Fair winds. Radiation released during massive power failure at Fukushima Daiichi. 24-hour outage is unconscionable. Shows plant unstable. Remember, it only takes 90 minutes for a meltdown to start. We learned that in past videos. Alright. Also today, Rat-like animal blamed for Fukushima blackout. Rodent able to endanger nuclear power plant. Oh no! Yesterday, crucial cooling system restored, TEPCO says. Local official. We don't believe Fukushima disaster is under control. NYT. Impossible to independently assess conditions at plant. Of course not. I told you, fire them all. After 2 years, it's done on purpose. That's the best way to tell you that, in layman's terms. Alright. U.S. Canada, Max, stop! Thank you. Governor, solvents being used from giant sinkhole, not only oil. Alright. Expert. Now 8 source zones of oil and gas could be feeding area underneath giant sinkhole. Also today, TV, giant sinkhole continues to grow 3 acres in past week. Governor, obvious oil sheen on top. I'll say it again. They should be embarrassed for saying we have an oil shortage when we have all that oil, and we should gather it, siphon it off, and only pay 25 cents a gallon for oil. Experts. Yesterday, oil bizarre engulfed from BP disaster. British Petroleum is BP. It just sucked everything out of the surface. Red layer fell on seafloor. Nobody knew what it was. Could cause significant damage to ecosystem. And there is a new flyover release. Sinkhole has grown and rainbow sheen covers much of it. Heads up. Alrighty then. That's all the news that is current, other than Obama is in the Middle East. So heads up on that. It is Wednesday hump day, 3 days down, 2 to go before the weekend. Maybe I will do a shout out. Hold on one moment. Because everyone deserves a shout out. Let's go in here. I almost forgot. I'm sorry. I apologize. I love my commentators. I love all of you out there. I want you all to be safe and be prepared for anything. But here we go. Let's do a shout out. Let's go into YouTube. Let's go into my inbox. It's going to take me a while to upload it, but there's a lot of information tonight. Please stay tuned. Alright, inbox. I would love to do a shout out to Sniff Oxygen. That's one word. Hello. Also, Smokin' JS all day. Whatever that means, but that's all one word. Tony space M. It's 2 words. Tony M. Heads up. Diana Perez. 2 words. Heads up. Lord Nagatron. All one word. Hello. Jake Ali. 2 words. Hello. ULIA 9111. Heads up. Hello. These are all my commentators. Excellent names. Excellent names. Check out their channels. Yell at Clark. Hello. SDWARCHER. Sid Watcher. All one word. Yehuda Gill. 2 words. Hello. Shout out. Battle of the Year 1. Cool name. Telemai Try 9. TELEMETRY 9. Heads up. You can play guitar. All one word. Shout out to you. Jeans Pretty Pops with a J. Hello. All one word. Shout out to Ulize 1313 ULIZES 1313. All one word. Receptivity 1884. Will K T9, all one word. Solar Wind, 2 words. Heads up. These are great names for channels. Jimmy Richardson, heads up to you. I know you've commented, but I got so many comments. Let's go to the next 20. 14842. Beetlejuice 1. That's a cool name. Beetlejuice 1. Beetlejuice 1, Beetlejuice 1, Beetlejuice 1. TEA 287, all one word. William May Hope writes, all one word. BORIRASTA 1970. Powerful Wart, cool name, all one word. Yehuda Guild again. Vermont Lake, all one word. Heads up. These are all channels. Maybe you want to check them all out. Layna, Layna 8, the number 8, all one word. Turakid, Turakid, all one word. 423-1 LESISMORE, all one word. Yuri Jonic, all one word, with a J. At AT4101, heads up. 88 Miss Bugsy, BUGSY, heads up. Woodtick Ray, heads up. She did a check out her channel, Woodtick Ray. She just did something on embryos, fetal cells in Pepsi, Nestle's, and check it out. It's gross. She just did that. Heads up. Nestle's, PepsiCo company, anything to do with them. There's another one, I'm not sure what it is. Check out Woodtick Ray's channel. Yes. Alrighty then. Alright. Again, it's 3 days down, 2 to go. We're at hump day. Hang in there. We got 2 more days before the weekend. I'll see you again tomorrow on the flip side. Please, please be safe. Be prepared for anything. And to the best of my ability, I have your backs. So watch my videos. Alright, take care.
So that's my trajectory as well.
Chris, give out your website if you would, please.
Certainly, it's www.logosapologia.org. That's LOGOSAPOLOGIA.org. And the book is exovaticana.com.
You got it. Chris, thanks so much. Stay in touch with us. You've always been a great guest here on Coast to Coast AM. In a moment, Marshall Masters joins us as we talk about Planet X. And you know, for years we have been talking on this program about the possibility of Planet X. We have talked with people such as Marshall Masters, who will join us in a moment, Zachariah Sitchin, Nancy Leader, so many other people. In a moment, we will talk more about the possibility of Planet X. And welcome back to Coast. Marshall Masters, author, publisher, internet radio host, founder of Your Own World Books. He is a former CNN Science Features news producer, U.S. Army Public Information Officer, specializes in Planet X and 2012 research. And here he is back on Coast to Coast. Marshall, always a pleasure. How are you?
George, great to be back.
You know, you have done yeoman's work, as we say in the Navy, on Planet X. How'd you get interested in this?
Oh, George, like everybody else, you walked straight backwards into it. You know, it's just one of those things. We were trying to figure out global warming, and this was back in 1999 and into 2000. And so at that point, we're looking at it. They don't call it, now that's not the politically correct term. I think, was it extreme climate or whatever it is. But at the time, we were looking at it, and what we were able to determine is that anthropomorphic causes were exacerbating the problem very clearly, but that it was principally solar driven. And so then we wanted to figure out, well, why is the sun been warming up? A very small amount, but it only takes a small amount, getting more active since 1940. And that was when we started seeing a pattern, and we wanted to figure out, okay, is this natural variability of the sun, or is the sun interacting with a body? And we ruled out natural variability, although we only have a few hundred years of information on the sun. But in terms of it interacting with an object coming in, that was really the one that we landed on that explained what we were seeing. And it was, I believe, the Ulysses probe, and this was one NASA had this, and it was in a circumpolar orbit around the sun, and they were studying the sun not as we see it now along the sun's equator, but from its northern and southern hemispheres, looking down on its poles. What they found was that this object, the sun, was clearly much more active in the southern hemisphere than in the northern hemisphere, and also it wasn't reacting where all this activity was going strict up or going all in a uniform direction out from the southern hemisphere, but it was really angling out from the sun at around 45 degrees down. And that, to us, made sense that it's interacting with some sort of object. From there, we had one fellow stepped up, and he'd been reading Sitchin's book, and we were looking at Sitchin. But, right from the beginning, what I wanted to do was find something that would corroborate what Sitchin was saying. We found that with the Colburn Bible, which has historical accounts of the object coming through, and which the ancient Egyptian accounts in that book tell us that it caused the sinking of Atlantis, Noah's flood.
Almost all the catastrophes.
Yeah. It's cyclical, 3,500-year cycle, long period orbit. And so what we found was that there was a huge amount of history on this object. And it's out there if you go looking for it, which is the beauty of the Internet. And, now, for example, everyone knows the story of Noah and the flood. There's hundreds of deluge accounts and cultures all around the globe. And in the Colburn was this account of Sesuda and Hanok, which is the parallel to Noah. And it gave much of the same information, almost wondering, were the authors cribbing each other's notes. But with the Colburn, it went into much more precise detail, where what it talks about was that it was actually a king went to this guy, that it was a super geek. They built this ark, the same dimensions, exact same dimensions as mentioned in the biblical account, but where they situated the ark was just not on a hill. They had to have very precise information about what was coming, because they were in a very long valley that opened out to the sea. And so when the surge came, when the pole shift happened, and all that water rushed in, they had that ark sitting just below where the flood tide would ebb. And so that as the water comes in, what it would do is it would come under the keel of the ship, as opposed to if it was down in the harbor, everything in the harbor, it's hydraulic sandpaper, just would grind everything to pieces. But the water, they knew where to position the ark so that when that flood tide came up, it was just enough to get under the keel of the ark, lift it up, and then as the tide receded, pull the ark out to sea. And it went down a huge slalom kind of event. And, similar things, very, very similar stories. And so we find history of this. We find history of this object in other cultures.
Something happened, Marshall. You're right. There's no doubt something happened.
So, we really, once we had that, it just is, you start following the breadcrumb trail. And it's what explains everything. You know, it's like the thing about Planet X as a topic is that it doesn't matter if there's, you know, these false events. Like I remember back in 2003 with Mark Hazelwood had published a book, Blindsided. It really stirred up a lot of fear. And that was when Sitchin called me and gave me an exclusive interview for our site, because we weren't seeing anything that would substantiate what Hazelwood was saying. So we published and we said, no, not now. It's not that it's not coming, but it's just not now.
It's not now. And I think they were talking about May of 2003, weren't they?
Yeah, May of 2003. And but what I remember about that, and it really stuck with us, were the letters that we got. Because people were writing us, because we were publishing on that. I think my first article went up in 2002. And we were studying it, and they were coming to us essentially for a second opinion. And the letters were, you could see where somebody's really biting their lip trying to sound rational and coherent and calm. The fear and the panic was oozing out of the lines. These were people getting ready to cash out their savings and head for the hills.
Which they always do when they think there's a catastrophe impending, huh?
Some do, some don't. But a lot of people do. And this was so upsetting for these people that reading these emails and responding to them was one of the most depressing times of my life. And I just swore after that I was never going to do anything like that. On the other hand, that doesn't stop me from looking for Planet X. And, you know, it's like Sitchin, I'll still be looking when I draw my last breath. But, you know, I'm not the only one that's been looking. People really don't understand the real history of this search for Planet X.
Are mainstream astronomers, Marshall, looking?
Well, that's the question is, are they telling, not are they looking?
Okay.
I think that what happened was we have an article up on the site that that tracks the press attention on this topic, which it really started up. What triggered the modern conversation was Velikovsky's book, Worlds in Collision. And after that came out in the 50s, there was this sudden interest in another object coming in through the system. And so the search was on for Planet X, the Nemesis star. Carl Sagan wrote a book called Comet that really talked about all of that. There was a very robust and brilliant scientific dialogue going on when we looked through these articles. I mean, we have amassed a huge amount of that. And then what happened was Zacharias Sitchin got a guy by the name of Harrington, who was an astronomer at the Naval Observatory. And he was looking for Planet X, had written a brilliant paper on it, and he actually had a telescope manufactured to his specifications because he figured that there was a point in time where an observation could have been made from New Zealand. So he got that arranged, and the observation was made, and the plates were brought back. He shared all of that with NASA, and what happened was before anything was published or anything was announced, all of the evidence disappeared. He mysteriously dies of a sudden onset of cancer.
Oh, really?
Yes. And
was he convinced that he did find a Planet X?
Well, not according to the anonymous obituary that was written that said he was so disappointed with his work that it had not been published, which, you know, when you read obituaries about someone who's a bright, talented fellow, did that much, it's like, why are you talking about these disappointments? But it was sending a coded, a veiled message that this was a third-rail topic, because where Harrington, his fatal mistake, I believe, was he went outside the fold. He gave Sitchin a television interview and a documentary, and he appeared with him discussing. And I think that was what put him on a target list. What we can definitely see when we were starting to trend all of the media that was out there, and the media was doing a brilliant job, George, a brilliant job. But after Harrington died, it was like the whole conversation went off.
Yeah, it was done.
So it's not are they seeing it? It's show and tell.
Why
They're not telling.
Why not tell us? What are they hiding?
Well, you know, for me, it's always been what I call Titanic rules. First class gets the boats, and steerage goes down with the ship. And the elites want to make good their getaway. You know, an amazing thing is that movie 2012 when it came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And if you watch it a couple of times so that your eyes get used to all the eye candy and the special effects, like people sitting there in, you know, like in a magnitude God knows what earthquake, and they're having a conversation. Once you get past that nonsense, you get into the subtext, the actual motivations, language, and methodology. What I can tell you is that is exactly how it is. Exactly. And in that movie, what happened? On the day the guacamole hits the fan, everybody's dying, and they don't know why.
That's right.
But where's all the, you know, the elites? You know, they're getting on the ships that they've paid to build and taking their poodles and their silverware with them.
Are you concerned about the Planet X, Marshall?
Yes, I am, because it explains to me what is happening, and it is the reason why people keep coming back to this topic, no matter what is done to try and kill it, because we are seeing what's happening in the world, and it's not making sense. And, you know, especially now, we have this increase in sightings of meteors. You know, I mean, in February, the one that Cheblinks in Russia.
Sure.
You know, the thing that was amazing for me is NASA has become extremely competent at predicting non-events. And they had put all their money, like on Red 7, okay? Asteroid, I was a DA 2012 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where all the media hype was on that. And what happened? Nothing. And on the day when they're hyping up all this media, the elites want to make good their getaway. You know, an amazing thing is that movie 2012 when it came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And if you watch it a couple of times so that your eyes get used to all the eye candy and the special effects, like people sitting there in, you know, like in a magnitude God knows what earthquake, and they're having a conversation. Once you get past that nonsense, you get into the subtext, the actual motivations, language, and methodology. What I can tell you is that is exactly how it is. Exactly. And in that movie, what happens? On the day the guacamole hits the fan, everybody's dying, and they don't know why.
That's right.
But where's all the, you know, the elites? You know, they're getting on the ships that they've paid to build and taking their poodles and their silverware with them.
Are you concerned about the Planet X, Marshall?
Yes, I am, because it explains to me what is happening. And it is the reason why people keep coming back to this topic, no matter what is done to try and kill it, because we are seeing what's happening in the world, and it's not making sense. And, you know, especially now, we have this increase in sightings of meteors. You know, I mean, in February, the one that Cheblinks in Russia.
Sure.
You know, the thing that was amazing for me is NASA has become extremely competent at predicting non-events. And they had put all their money, like on Red 7, okay? Asteroid, I was a DA 2012 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where all the media hype was on that. And what happened? Nothing. And on the day when they're hyping up all this media about tracking this thing, the biggest rock to hit the planet in over a century goes off over Russia. 1,500 people sustain injury.
And had that happened a little lower, it would have obliterated that area.
Absolutely.
And the people.
Yes, it went off like a nuke, and as it was, people were picking glass out of their faces. And because it just blew in windows. And people just sitting there having some tea and biscuits with a friend. Next thing you know, you got glass in the side of your face. And nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming. And all NASA could say afterwards was, it's not our job. We're not paid to look for stuff. We're not given money to look for stuff that small. But yet, where's the real risk going to come from? It's that kind of small stuff that can come in. Imagine if that thing had gone off over New York or Paris.
Oh, there would have been no more New York or Paris.
Yeah.
The lower these things blow up, the worse it is, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this was the only thing that saved those folks in the Urals was that it was, a good distance away from them before it detonated. It didn't detonate overhead. And also some of the media accounts were a little washy, like the one where they were showing the big hole in the ice.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, well,
picture.
Yeah, my wife was Russian. She goes, everybody knew about this hole for a long time. But it was, it was good bait to throw at the media. But we have that. We're having anomalous, solar behavior. The NASA for years was predicting that this solar maximum would be the worst on record.
So far, it's been uneventful.
Yes.
So far. But now they backtracked a little bit, Marshall. Now they're saying, a NASA scientist is saying that it'll be double what things have been once it starts.
Yeah, it's the new double peak, and the second peak is going to be the when the shoe falls, and which, incidentally, it's interesting timing-wise. When the second peak of this solar max happens, it's in the same approximate time frame as Comet ISON, and that's going to be a big thing. So, whatever it is that they're doing, what we know is there's things they don't see. All right, and they can't. It's hard for them to admit that.
Sitchin talked about Planet X as being on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit.
Right.
Where would that put it now, do you think?
Well, right now, it is coming up from the southern skies. There is a group on YouTube called 00 the Sky View. I've been tracking these guys for some time. I follow them. They don't talk to anybody. They pretty much keep to themselves, and I have to admit, I think it's a wise thing for them to do. But they have their own infrared equipment, and they've shown their telescopes. They show their equipment, what they have. They've been imaging it, and it's tracking. And what I find is what they have, I'm finding direct parallels between what they're tracking currently. Okay, and right now they're saying, George, in June of this year, it's visible to everybody in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, they can't hide it then, Marshall.
They can't hide it then. So, but what I found interesting in the parallels is that, first off, what they've been imaging with this mini constellation, with a dark star in the center and satellites around it, is exactly what we saw in 2008 with the disclosure videos out of the South Pole Telescope.
Let's talk more about that, Marshall, when we roll right back on Coast to Coast AM. Well, when you're not listening to the radio program, possibly you're doing a little television on our Beyond Belief television show, which you can see on Fridays, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, or anytime you want, because it's a subscription basis, you just look at it when you want to. And we've started quite a library of videos for you as well. You can look at a whole bunch of stuff, and you get it for 10 days free. Simply go to GaiamTV.com, GAIAMTV.com/George, or go to our website, click Hosts, right there at the top of the homepage, and the TV icon opens up. Take a look at it. Take advantage of the 10 days free. And welcome back to Coast. Marshall Masters with us. Marshall, I'm really fascinated, of course, about Planet X. Sitchin's theory, the Anunnaki lived on that planet, came here to gold, mining gold, genetically altered us. Do you believe there are inhabitants on that planet?
To me, all bets are on the table. And the history is clearly there. There's a history of visitation. So, yes, I would say that there's, on this mini constellation coming in, there's going to be life. And when I look at the history, particularly us as human beings with our preoccupation with gold, which is really a very rare thing, but, when I was a young man in college, I got gold fever. And,
we all do at one point.
Yeah. And I was racing around the hills of Prescott, Arizona, looking for plaster or abandoned Spanish mine shafts, and all I ever found was broken shock absorbers. But I can tell you one thing, gold fever, when you get it, there's nothing like it. There's nothing you can do to intoxicate yourself or anything.
It's like the flu. Yeah. You get it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's powerful. It's powerful. And so, yeah, I think that's something that's in our genetic and racial history, in our memory, that, we were bred to mine gold. And we have this incredible fascination with gold. There's things as other elements that are, more valuable, but that's the one we go gaga on. And so, yeah, I definitely think that's it. And, one of the things that we're noticing right now, just as a point of interest, because of Turrialba, we're looking at different volcanoes around the world.
And how does that tie in? Did they react to this planet?
Well, we're seeing a lot of volcanism. Etna right now is spitting fire. That's not a good sign. We're seeing a lot of subsea volcanism. We're seeing seabed shifting. There's another spat of...
Do you hear that clicking, by the way, Marshall?
I don't hear the clicking on this side. Work with it with your technician, and I'm clear on this side.
Okay, we're hearing some clicks from you.
See, it wasn't me.
So let's monitor that.
Okay.
You don't hear any dropouts or anything?
No, I'm not hearing any clicks or dropouts on my side.
Okay.
And then we got it down to just a simple corded headset with all my computers off.
We might have to get off the headset if you can. Can you do that?
Excuse me. It's a corded handset, the phone.
Handset. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's try this out, and let's see how far we go before we lose you on the phone. Okay? Maybe Planet X is coming around.
Or maybe just somebody doesn't want me to have this conversation.
Well, you know what? That was coming up. I was in New Jersey this weekend. People kept asking me, why are controversial people seem to always get clipped? And then, we have to look for them and get them back on. So who knows?
Yeah. I mean, this is just a perpetual problem. Now, it always has been over the years, and depending on the topic, and particularly with what we're looking at right now and current circumstances. So it's, just a harassment thing. We'll just soldier through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely clicking along at a snail's pace, but it's clicking. All right, let's talk about prophecy and how it's tied into Planet X, especially the Mayans. Marshall?
Okay. Hold on a second here. George?
Yeah?
Is this other phone, tell me if we're still having the click on this other phone.
Well, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, did you hear my question?
Throw it at me again.
All right. Prophecy. Why does it seem that so many civilizations have the same views of Planet X?
Same history.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, when we look at the story of Exodus, which was the last time Planet X came through, the biblical account, which is allegorical, really, you know, it's about Moses and Pharaoh. But what we're seeing, it was a much broader thing. This was global. And actually, the Egyptian accounts of Exodus are very detailed. They're very similar. Where they're not the same is that the Egyptians do say that Pharaoh led the charge, that they really wreaked havoc on the back end of the host. He just slayed all massive numbers of Jews and Egyptians, but the waters came back and Pharaoh and the army were drowned. And afterwards, Egypt was invaded from the south because they had gold and wheat. And everybody was hungry and broke and coming for it. So their problems after the Exodus were pretty horrific, but they soldiered through that. And that was the result of the Colburn Bible, which was essentially their 9/11 report. They were trying to figure out how did these scrappy little Jews with their one God whip their pantheon of God. And they wanted to leapfrog all of that, and, you know.
Did they think that they had divine intervention?
Oh, yeah. No, the Egyptians were absolutely, when the Jews were leaving, I mean, they gifted them vast amounts of treasure. And then after the Jews left, the Egyptian people went to Pharaoh begging him to return the Jews so that their God would come along with them and stop all of this misery. And but he took out after them, and I think Moses was a prince of Egypt, and he knew where the state secrets were.
The parting of the Red Sea, Marshall, was that tied into Planet X?
I don't know that it was. It would be consistent with events that were happening during that time. The Egyptians, in their history, had accounts from previous flybys of Planet X. So they knew it. They called it the Destroyer. The Hebrews called it the Destroyer. As a matter of fact, depending on which version of the Bible you get, they're going to use the. As a matter of fact, depending on which version of the Bible you get, they're going to use the term destroyer, or they're going to substitute it with something else. But the more modern editions of the Bible do call it the destroyer. The Hebrews called it the destroyer.
I think we lost you.
Am I still here?
Yeah, you're there. Okay, but you're still clicking. So we're going to work on this during the break, okay?
Yeah.
If we can.
Okay, well, I've tried two different phones here.
It's your line somewhere. It's not your phones. But we'll have Tom talk to you during the break.
Okay.
All right. The Planet X that the Hopis talked about. They talked about the blue star. Same thing, or something different?
Actually, the blue star and the red star Kachina scenario is starting to match what we're seeing in the evidence that we have right now. We're tracking an object that we're observing daily. As a matter of fact, if somebody goes to my website and the links are there, you can follow it along with us. And I've named it Blue Bonnet, but this object came up from the southern skies. It appears to have transited Ophiuchus when it crossed the ecliptic, or about the time of December 21 at the solstice. And it went north of the ecliptic. It's not behaving like any of the known planets. And the interesting thing is we're doing a natural progression study on it right now. We have, I think, about 1,400 images on this thing, plus hours and hours of video. And that enables us to go back and say, let's study different aspects. let's look at, for example, doing a Terminator study. Does the daylight side of the object always face towards the sun if it's south of the sun or north of the sun?
Is this a water planet too, Marshall?
Hard to say. It is bluish. It's blue and white. That's why I call it bluebonnet. It really reminds me of the bluebonnet flowers in Texas. And the interesting thing about it is, in this progression study, and this is pretty preliminary, we'll release this later on, but what we're seeing is a pattern where when it is south of the ecliptic, it's a little larger and a little brighter. When it gets to the ecliptic, we're not seeing crescent shapes in the Terminator. It's a full face, but it's smaller. But then as it goes north, it gets bigger and brighter. And what we've seen now is it's starting to head south again, back towards the ecliptic. And this is really a puzzling thing. It's an enigma. We've been trying to, to determine what's happening with it, but it's not moving in relationship. It moves like a natural object. As the sun sets, it goes off the horizon.
How close does it come to planet Earth? Obviously close enough to, have havoc.
Well, if it's the blue Kachina of the Hopi prophecy, the blue Kachina is the harbinger sign that causes a certain amount of trouble. What follows on the heels of that is what the Hopi call the red Kachina. And the red Kachina is the one that spells the end of life as we know it. It's the one that racks the world. My guess is right now the object we're looking at would be the harbinger object, blue bonnet or blue Kachina, if you will. I think that this other group, 00 Skyview, but also the SPT telescope disclosure videos from 2008, Nibiru shock, and that's focusing on the dark star that's at the core of that mini solar system.
Well, what are the odds of the planet one being blue, as you just mentioned, and the Hopis talking about the blue Kachina? I mean, to me, that's remarkably similar, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this is, George, what really bothers me most about it is we can't debunk it. I mean...
Would you like to?
Yeah. I don't want this to be real. I want everybody to laugh at me for chasing a ghost. Because this is what we're seeing as an object. It's a natural object. And you could look any day and watch it for hours.
By the way, we're going to switch to your cell phone at the top of the hour. Okay? So make sure you plug it in and we'll try that.
Okay.
We're getting more clips than you can imagine. Are the catastrophes that this planet has, that it brings with it, are they similar every time they come by? I mean, let's say it comes by every 3,600 years, does it bring the same kind of catastrophes?
It varies. It's going to be, it's a matter of location. Where are we in relationship to it when it's coming through? And you can have a benign flyby or a relatively benign flyby, or you can have something super catastrophic. For example, it caused Noah's flood in one flyby, but in another it caused the 10 plagues of Exodus, which was surely not a deluge event. So that's the big open question, is when it comes through, do we catch a break? We don't get lucky this time.
In terms of recorded history, could it have caused the sinking of what might have been Atlantis?
The Colburn Bible says it did.
Tell us that story.
Excuse me?
Tell us that story.
Well, what it does is it mentions it, and it's an allegory. It's covered in a book that was written by Greg Jenner, Planet X and the Colburn Bible Connection. What it does is it's talking about that particular flyby created a tremendous amount of volcanism and shifts in seabed. So, and that was what took Atlantis down. The account is short, but it is clearly mentioned. Where we get more of the detail is in the story of Sesuda and Hanok with the deluge story.
Explain that one for me a little more.
That was the one we had talked about a little earlier, Sesuda and Hanok, where the king had, was given a warning. Some men came to him that he knew and trusted and said, here is what is going to happen.
Who do you think they were? Just prophetic people?
I thought about that. I don't think that it was prophetic. I think that it was extraterrestrial. It had to be because of the way, in the account of Sesuda and Hanok, where the ark was built.
Could they have been from that planet?
Possibly. They could have been from anywhere. They could have just been, friends. Who knows who's coming? I mean, you look around at volcanoes, and one of the things I found amazing is we started looking at volcanoes, and the first thing you notice is that there's always UFO reports tied in with this. So the UFOs are all over this. When they see this activity, they're hovering over the volcanoes. I think that it could have been someone who, a friend from afar. It's hard to say where they came from, but there's no question in my mind that it had to have been extraterrestrial because somebody had to know exactly where to place the ark so that the flood,
the rising waters would pick it up, right?
That's right. And the point was, in a very special way, not where you have a huge wall of water slam into the side of the ark that would destroy any vessel, but rather that the water ebbed up so that it came underneath the keel, and there was enough buoyancy, just enough buoyancy to lift it off so that then when the flood waters receded back out to the ocean, it would go back out with it. And that is extremely precise placement. I don't see how anybody, particularly at that time or even at this time, could predict with that much accuracy where the floodwaters would reach.
No, that's true.
So you have somebody that obviously has, a high technology. They're able to see this, and they're going down and trying to preserve whatever life is possible on the planet.
And also, who could predict where the floodwaters would take the ark when it started to recede?
Yes. I mean, it was in a narrow valley, but the way it was placed was in the account, and I'm reading that, and I'm, one of the things, I'm sitting there with a Marks-a-Lot board, and I'm reading the story, and I'm drawing pictures as I go along. That's the thing about the Colburn. It reads just like Man on the Street report.
All right, would you hold on here, Marshall? We're going to be back with you in a moment. We're going to check your line, probably get you a different call, different phone, and we'll come back in a moment. I'm going to talk with you about Nostradamus and what he had to say about all of this, and we'll give it a try. Marshall Masters, our guest here on Coast to Coast AM, as we talk about Planet X. With our very special guest tonight, Marshall Masters, as we talk about Planet X. We'll be back with Marshall in just a moment. Marshall Masters with us. Marshall, what about Nostradamus? What did he have to say about this and his prophecies?
Well, George, this is the one thing that I really found interesting was, A&E put out a show called The Lost Book of Nostradamus.
Right.
And in that, there's one of the plates and where Nostradamus is making very specific predictions that this object, this harbinger object, would arise out of the constellation of Fucus. Now, Fucus is near Sagittarius. It is what's called the 13th constellation of the zodiac. And this was something that was used by astrologers, and then when they went to setting up what we now have, which is evenly divided, more easy to work with. The Fucus was set to the side. But it's still always been a very important constellation. When the guy that came to me about this blue-spotted object that we're observing, and he came to me just before the end of last year, and he's an expatriate American. He's a college administrator, retired, and he's been watching this webcam for the Turrialba volcano, which is on the 10th latitude.
Okay.
And what he saw was this object was appearing in the afternoons. Now, they all watch it down there because he lives at the base of this volcano, and they want to know when it's time to start running downhill, screaming, "Please don't fail me now." And that's when he noticed this thing popping up. Well, I started tracking it, and at first, I didn't pay attention to it when the guy sent it to me. One of the first pictures he sent was actually a moonrise. That was easy to debunk. The second time, I was looking at it, and I was going, well, that could be Venus, but then it really wasn't Venus, because it was way too far off of the ecliptic for Venus. And I still was really undecided about it. I didn't, and like a lot of people, you don't want to even look at it, but he just kept coming at me and saying, because it was really tasking him, it was really bothering him. And he said, just please, you know, this thing shows up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon and stays there until around 5:30. Well, if you have an object that's close to the sun, you're going to see it before sunrise, or you're going to see it before sunset. That's where you're going to see it.
Right in between. That's right.
That's right. So this thing is obviously very close to the sun. I've been studying a lot of these two suns of the sky photos that people have been reporting on the internet, and particularly with cell phone images. But this is a high-definition, fixed-mounted surveillance camera with a very good lens at about 10,000 feet, pointed west by southwest. And sure enough, I sat there, and it was a good viewing day. Not every day is a good viewing day. Turrialba is a very humid area. You can see humidity over 90% quite often, even at that altitude. So you have, and then plus it's an active volcano with vapor rising up off of it from the venting, plus passing clouds, and then you have cloud banks. And the vapor and the passing clouds, those are tens of meters thick, whereas your cloud banks are tens of kilometers. And from this volcano, you can actually see as far as the Pacific on a very clear day. Well, I sat there, and I got the object, and I just started watching it. And I watched it for almost 2 hours.
How big does it look?
And in terms of size, I would say that it looks about the size right now of Venus, a little larger than Venus would look, and also much more clarity and definition.
Okay.
And what we're noticing now is it's actually about twice that bright. Twice that big, twice that bright. It's reached a part of its orbit where it's starting to go down again towards the ecliptic. And this is a pattern that we've just now detected in all this information. And we have found a database of images from this volcano surveillance camera in different places. We found as early as 2010, where the object was showing up around a little bit around 5 o'clock in the afternoon for maybe about 5 or 10, 15 minutes. Then as it proceeds into 2012, it's longer duration viewing. We got a really good find on a lot of historical imagery from the United States Air Force School up in Alaska. They had an archive. We downloaded that archive. Plus everything that we've been capturing continuously on our own. Each and every day, I have a team of 4 people. And the archivist is Barbara, and I have Jack, and I have William, and I have Ed. and everyone's working on it. Every day somebody's watching this object and downloading imagery on it, as anyone else could do. The thing is, George, nobody wants to look at it.
Why not?
Fear.
Fear of what? Fear of what,
Just
Marshall?
fear. It's
I would find it to be just unbelievable.
I thought the same thing at first. George, honest to God, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, for years we've been carping and complaining about the fact that, somebody say, well, show it to me. I got a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm waiting for you to give me the coordinates. So what I'm saying, here's the web link, here's the URL. Go look at this thing and explain it. And what happens is people will look at it for about 5 seconds, and then they run away from it because they look at that, and I think it just must tap into some deep racial memory of a very bad time, because there's a fear reaction. And the fear reaction, here's the thing that boggles my mind, George, is that the fear doesn't matter how technically illiterate or literate you are. As a matter of fact, what I have found in this is that the folks that come to it with the heaviest science backgrounds are the ones that have the most violent emotional reactions to it. People who are not technically illiterate look at it and go, nah, that's trouble, I'm not going to do it, and they walk away. The other ones will go to insane trivialities, and which is fine. I'm bringing it on. Let's try and debunk this thing. Let's disprove it. Let's disprove it. And so there's the all range of these trivial theories. It's Venus, it's a reflection, it's a refraction, it's a scratch on the lens, it's this, it's that. And so when you have as much data as we have, this is not something, George, where I have one picture and I'm trying to get the whole world to believe in one picture. I'm sitting here with 1,400 images in my database. So when I say to my team, we're going to do a natural progression study, here's what I want. I want imagery where I have the sun and the object in the field of view, very clear, and I want to have them as spaced apart as regular as we can. And the problem we have is when we go back into the database, we have so many of them that'll pop up. We have to start cherry picking and sifting through the ones that we want to do. So we have all of this, and every time I go back to this archive, I can, a debunker is going to go, I'm going to say, is this a real object? And they're going to go, well, no, it's not. And I say, why? Because of this, this, and this. All right. So if it had been a real object, what would I have seen? And they go, well, it wouldn't have been this, this, and this. It would have been that, that, and that. Okay? So I go back to my archive, and I come back with a pile of that, that, and that. And I show it to them. And what do they say? Aha, it's a reflection.
So I go, they won't admit it.
They won't admit it. And I say, why is it a reflection? They say, because it's that, that, and that, which means it's not this, this, and this. So they get into the security logic. They can't withstand scrutiny on their debunkings. And when I come back and I throw the evidence at them, they explode in my face, call me names, and storm off. But I can't get somebody to cold and sober be a good cynic. I'm looking for a good cynic here. I'm looking for somebody that can come to me and say, here's what explains everything you're seeing. I can't find that. Nobody has showed up to tell that story yet.
Where do you think Planet X is right now, Marshall?
Well, it depends on what we're going to call Planet X. Because it's obviously what we're looking at. For years, George, I've always maintained Planet X could be anything. It could be a comet. It could be, a rogue planet. It could be whatever it is. What we're seeing right now, the only thing that explains the data that we're seeing now, particularly now that we have started doing our natural progression studies, is that we're observing an object that is the outermost satellite of the mini constellation that is currently under observation by 00 Skyview, and which was disclosed in disclosure videos in 2008 by 3 different people. And those shut down about as fast as a New York minute. I mean, one guy, I was lucky. I got tipped by somebody who knew what was going on. I was able to download that video. It was DNR 8 something. It was really kind of an arcane name. But his video was only up for about 8 hours, and his video was not only pulled, the account was terminated. Blipped. Okay? And with YouTube, you know, you get one mistake. He didn't even get one mistake. They just tossed him. So what I think we're seeing right now, George, all I can say is that I'm looking at the data, and that's the reason why I'm hoping to God I get from someone to go down in Costa Rica to Irazu volcano, which is open at 11,000 feet, and it's at the 9th parallel. It's within 50 miles of the other volcano, and to see if they can get a boots-on-the-ground observation. Because if they can, then what we're seeing, what we're watching right now with my team, we're seeing the outermost satellite, which would be the blue Kachina of Hopi prophecy. Whereas,
and what do the Hopis say? Marshall, let's review just a minute. What do the Hopis say about the blue star?
well, the blue star is the one we see first, and it unmasks. It becomes suddenly visible. And this is very, very consistent with ancient historical accounts that we have found in the Colburn Bible and elsewhere that says when this thing shows up, it comes out of nowhere. I mean, it just caught them by surprise. Now, look at it this way. The ancients, when it came to astronomy, in terms of our solar system, out to Saturn, hey, they were the past masters. They're still teaching us stuff. Today, what do we have? We have, with all of this freakish weather that we're having, there's huge amounts of vapor that are up in the air right now. We have chemtrails spraying like crazy. So if you are below the cloud cover, visibility stinks, especially, with most of us being in large cities with light pollution, with all of these other factors, whereas if you're above the clouds, it's a whole different ball of wax. And I think that what we could see is a 1-2 situation where if this is a real object, and I tend to think now that it's going to be incoming, in other words, we're closing on it. The reason why is we go back into the historical data, particularly the images that we pulled off that U.S. Air Force site. And when we're looking at that, and we're doing our natural progression study, that natural progression is just simply saying, you're observing it as it happens. That's it. How does this thing behave at different points along the way? What we see is when it's acquired south of the ecliptic, it's bigger and brighter. As it moves towards the ecliptic, which is the plane of the system, it becomes smaller. And also, we don't have the crescent terminator that you're going to see. It's like a full moon, but it's half the size. Then as it starts going north, up above the ecliptic, what's happening is that it starts increasing in size. So what that tells me is we're closing with it. Because right now, I can tell you that, when I started looking at this, because my archivist is feeding me, cherry-picking samples for me on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. She's pulling down multiple copies. Barbara's doing a fabulous job. And I'm looking at one and I'm going, hold on a second. I went back to my stuff that I had done in the first week of January, the captures I made, and I compared it, and the object is nearly about 2.5 times the size and the brightness of when I first saw it in January. So that means we're closing on it, and it's also coming south of the ecliptic. If we use the timing that 00 Skyview is using, and they're actually making infrared observations of the mini constellation and the dark star at the center of that constellation, and what they're saying is this summer, midsummer, it's going to become visible, which would mean the object that we're looking at would come visible before that, perhaps in May. And that'll happen. For me, I'm saying if we get corroboration on this, then we know what to look for. We get through the summer, we get through the end of the year. We can breathe easy and just say, okay, we got spooked by some ghosts.
Will this be difficult to hide?
God, difficult to hide. You know, people look at it and they can't believe what they're seeing. That's the thing that stuns me, George. You would want to run out and see it. I would want to run out and see it.
In a heartbeat.
And a lot of people say that they would, but when it gets right down to it, nobody wants to see it. What they want to do, the instant they take one look at that, the reaction, I don't care if they have a degree in physics or they drive a truck. I don't care. I see them all doing the same thing.
What is
They
that?
lock the closet, they turn on the bedroom lights, crawl into bed and pull the covers over their head, because if the monsters don't see them and they don't see the monsters, no harm, no foul. It is this bizarre, this object is, to me, it's a mystery, it's an enigma, but people have this gut, visceral kind of reaction that just seems to reach down into the core of our racial memory.
Are they afraid of this object?
Yes.
Are you?
Right there. I'm not afraid of it. I'm trying to solve a mystery. If the mystery, and it's going to have one or two possibilities. It's the sum of all fears, or Marshall's chasing a ghost. If Marshall's chasing, can all have a good laugh at my expense, and you're going to have to laugh louder than I am. But I can't debunk it. Nobody can debunk it. I'm the one that I sit there and I go, I've had nights where I just lay there and it grinds and I go, aha, if it's thus and such, I should find this. I go down, that's what I find. Even when I'm pulling the most wild, crazy debunking ideas out of my head, I can't debunk it. Nobody else can. That is, and that's the reason why I am just, please, somebody, if you have a friend in Costa Rica, pick up the phone and say, hey, go to Ira Zoo in the late afternoon before sunset and see if you can see it, because they should be able to see it from that other sister stratovolcano that's within eyesight of Turrialba.
Marshall, when we come back, I want to talk about, believe it or not, Mayan prophecy. You believe it's still around, so let's find out when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, we'll open up the phone lines. You can chat with Marshall Masters about Planet X. I'll be back with him and much more on Coast to Coast AM.
Have one or two possibilities. It's the sum of all fears, or Marshall's chasing a ghost. If Marshall's chasing, can all have a good laugh at my expense, and you're going to have to laugh louder than I am. But I can't debunk it. Nobody can debunk it. I'm the one that I sit there and I go, I've had nights where I just lay there and it grinds and I go, aha, if it's thus and such, I should find this. I go down, that's what I find. Even when I'm pulling the most wild, crazy debunking ideas out of my head, I can't debunk it. Nobody else can. That is, and that's the reason why I am just, please, somebody, if you have a friend in Costa Rica, pick up the phone and say, hey, go to Ira Zoo in the late afternoon before sunset and see if you can see it, because they should be able to see it from that other sister stratovolcano that's within eyesight of Turrialba.
Marshall, when we come back, I want to talk about, believe it or not, Mayan prophecy. You believe it's still around, so let's find out when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, we'll open up the phone lines. You can chat with Marshall Masters about Planet X. I'll be back with him and much more on Coast to Coast AM. Marshall, how big do you think the object is, the planet? Earth size?
It's going to be this is going to be a planet-sized object in Earth size. It appears to be that way, somewhere between Earth and Venus in size.
Now, with it being that big, why can you really only see it from a certain location?
There's a number of different factors. First off, it's coming up from the ecliptic or near the ecliptic, and it's also very close to the sun.
Okay.
When you are, the thing that's really important, you know, I was fortunate enough in some years ago when I went on vacation in Hawaii, I went to Haleakala, the observatory.
Okay.
That's around 9,000 feet. But I watched a sunrise, and I watched the sun come up from beneath the clouds, and you know, when you can actually see the curve, you know, you can see the curve of the Earth, you can see the ocean out there, you see things much further and in much more clarity than you can below the clouds, which is why you have these big observatories on tops of these mountains and on top of these volcanoes, because that's where the optimal viewing is. You get below the cloud cover, all right? Now it's a different problem because you have all of the things that are obfuscating. We had some interesting research. Last year we had 2 observation sightings that people saw 2 suns in the sky with their eyes and then took cell phone images. One was using a BlackBerry, the other one was using a 4S, and in both cases, we had strong images and we had personal accounts from very credible people, but we couldn't authenticate them. But that did clearly show me something, because in both cases, these 2 people who had eyewitness observations were near sunset at altitude on civilian flights. So that told me 2 things. They're above the chemtrail layers, and they're above the cloud layer, and it's before sunset, which would be consistent with it being an object near the sun. That clued me into that. So it's this, you know, it's a special kind of keyhole effect where you can see it, but you have to be at the right place and you have to be at the right time until it comes to a point where it's in everybody's face. I don't care how many chemtrails they spray, we'll see it. But right now, it's incredibly difficult to see it below the cloud layer. But if someone's flying, you know, for months now, I've been asking folks, when you're up there, go get yourself a pair of the, you know, because you're looking in the direction of the sun. I don't want anybody to hurt their eyes.
Right, you got to be careful.
So I asked them, yeah, you know, so you have your sunglasses, but it's much better. For a few dollars, you can go on the astronomy sites and Amazon or whatever. You can get those eclipse viewing glasses. Those little things that look like the old TV glasses that we had at the theaters.
Yeah.
You can get those. They'll protect your eyes. You can use that for the observation, but also use it for the camera as well, and to go out and do that. And so I've been asking for folks that are at altitude on civilian flights near sunset. And one of the things you have to do is just make sure you know the direction you're going in so you can book on which side of the plane that's facing. So we've already seen this trend where it's observable from different places. You know, one case it was Japan, and the other case was Australia. So that for me says, all right, it's altitude and visibility. What kind of viewing sky do you have? Those are the critical things. So for now, we're really just dealing with locations that are going to either be extremely high altitude, 35,000 feet, all right? If not, you've got to be as close to the equator as possible. Costa Rica is pretty close to the equator, and along that 10th parallel, all right, what do you got? Ho Chi Minh City? Like, what are they going to see? They're a few feet above sea level. What are they going to see? You know, you've got the folks out there, I think Caracas, Venezuela, they're at about 2,000 or 3,000 feet. They're not going to see it. But here's another thing that is consistent with Turrialba volcano and the at-altitude images, is that when you are high up, your sunset time frame is longer. Now, imagine you're in San Jose, Costa Rica, which is around 3,000 feet above sea level, and it's a little further west of Turrialba. When people are sitting there and they see the sunset because remember, they're looking at the nap of the Earth. All right, they're looking out straight across at the nap of the Earth. And so consequently, when the sun sets in Costa Rica, or in San Jose, Costa Rica, things are just getting interesting from Turrialba, which is 7,000 feet higher up. And the reason why is you have that angle of view, so you actually have a prolonged sunset. That's the kicker here, is that's what makes it, that plus the viewing sky, that you have this absolute clear viewing sky. But it is this consistent pattern, whether somebody's in an airplane or they're on top of a volcano, they have this additional, if you will, extended sunset period. And this really goes to, particularly in the case of the 2010 imagery. There was this fellow, I think his name was Rodolfo, and he's a technical guy, works for a technology company there in Costa Rica, and for some reason, he just had this interesting thing to go and capture video. Well, and he amassed quite a bit of it throughout the year. And this was the only source we had. What we saw was in January, there was no absolute sign whatsoever. So we know that as of January 2010, it wasn't showing up. But in mid-February, we started seeing it popping up for a few minutes close to sunset, and then that trend just keeps going forward. So when people are saying, is the Mayan prophecy wrong? You know, my thing is on that, well, first off, the universe is not unfolding at the speed of human expectations. And the smart thing to do, what I tell my team all the time, I repeat it, it's a mantra. I'm sure they're sick of hearing it, but I always say the same thing.
It works.
Believe nothing, observe everything. Observe it. See it in situ. See it where it lays.
So you don't think the Mayan prophecy is over by any means, do you?
No, we've entered into it. I think that what's over is the nonsense hype.
Right.
You know, particularly like we were all going to wake up on December 21 and sing Kumbaya and buy the world a Coke. That didn't happen. At least sure not in North Korea. But, there was a lot of hype on 2012. And I think there was a lot of hype that I saw this hype being generated around the common Elenin thing. I've seen this kind of hype generated before. And I will say, back in 2003, that has always been useful for me with the Nancy Leader and the Mark Hazelwood thing. And I spoke with Nancy about that a lot. She was really angry with Hazelwood because he plagiarized her work. But let's a natural event.
Let's say allegedly, huh? I don't think he was ever nailed.
Well, you know, Nancy sent me a copy of the cease and desist letter her lawyer wrote for her.
Yeah, but any lawyer.
But she didn't have the money to pursue it. That's all.
I know.
So you know, it was, if you don't like it, you got to lump it. What are you going to do?
Oh no, I know. You can't say somebody plagiarized it when he's never been convicted.
Yeah, but he's still the same.
Keeping it honest. Keeping it honest.
Pardon, George?
Keeping it honest.
Yeah, just keeping it honest. You're starting to break up on my side. So if I don't catch the questions, I'll just ask you again.
Okay.
But what was useful about that whole thing in 2003, George, was that was a natural event. All right? It was a natural whip-up. And it had the pattern of a natural whip-up. And I will tell you, after it was about, I think, in June, it was supposed to be there in May, didn't show up. Everyone's kind of give it 30 days, see if the check's in the mail. It didn't show up, and in June, the topic collapsed. In August of that year, we published an article, Is It Time to Revisit Planet X? Besides us, 4 other people read it, okay? But the topic keeps coming back because it's the only thing that explains all of the crazy stuff that is happening to our world.
Well, and there's lots.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it right now, and we're seeing, seabeds are rising. I'm more concerned, frankly, with what's happening below the water than I am what's happening on land. 70% of the planet is covered with water. And, it's so easy for us when we have this, if I don't see it with my own 2 eyes, it doesn't exist, all right? Well, we can't see what's happening to 70% of the planet. But there's a lot that's happening, and that's the part that really worries me, because you have seabeds that are rising and falling. You have subsea volcanism. We're watching right now in the Canary Islands. That is a real hot point for everybody on the East Coast, because the Canary Islands starting to have microquake swarming activity.
Well, and if that La Palma volcano goes, the whole thing goes, doesn't it?
If La Palma goes, the western flank collapses because it's already weakened from an eruption that happened shortly after World War II. And that western flank of that volcano collapses. It's going to send a wall of water across the Atlantic at the speed of a jet airplane. And from Maine to Florida, we get hosed.
Yeah, we do, big time. And how far in? 20 miles, maybe?
40.
Jeez. That's a lot of space.
From inland as far as 40 miles. That's how big it's going to be. That's how powerful it's going to be. So, and the thing of it is that once that happens, it's 8 hours. And try to get out of New York City in 8 hours. I mean, everything will jam up, and people are just going to drown like rats if they're not watching it. So, I mean, if I were living on the East Coast, every day I would be monitoring the Canary Islands, because that is threat number 1. If you're living on the West Coast, you're monitoring Cascadia. If you're living in the center of the country, you're monitoring what's happening at Yellowstone. Those are your principal major threat things that you have to keep on the radar scope.
Well, and that caldera is long overdue, isn't it?
Pardon?
That caldera is long overdue.
Yeah.
And
they red listed that thing, and it hasn't come off red list. So we have, and there's a tremendous amount of volcanism that's going on right now. That's all around the world. We have a lot of volcanoes that have been dormant for a long time that are getting active again. You're seeing, all of these. We have sensor. The interesting thing is that the sensor buoys keep going out. We all of a sudden, for years, all of these buoys out there that were measuring the water column were stable and never had a problem. All of a sudden, there's all kinds of technical problems, which usually happen after a massive shift in a seabed. I'm talking about seabeds going up and down in huge amounts. And so there's all of this subsea volcanism, everything that's going on. The sun right now is peculiar odd. I think what's really interesting for me is that there's very little Earth-directed activity. There's very little activity that's happening on our side. When we're seeing these flares and CMEs, it's on the other side of the sun. That, for me, is an interesting thing. But also, I'm looking at Bluebonnet, this object, or the Blue Kachina, if that's what we're looking at. It's on the other side of the sun as well. So there's all of these factors. But then, if you just take a step back from that, George, and you look at what is happening with our own country, what are governments doing in response to all of this? For example, the government is, for agencies that are not frontline active combat agencies, They're buying billions of rounds of ammunition.
Yep. Social Security, Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Noah, what does Noah need 1 million bullets for?
1 billion.
1 million. Or whatever it doesn't matter what, when we get to the millions and the billions, it's like, how are you going to get out to the range and shoot this stuff in a century? Okay?
So your theory is that this planet that's coming closer and closer is going to have havoc on this planet again, and they, the power brokers, are going to get ready for it.
They're already ready. And what I can tell you is this is definitely something you want to look for. When you start seeing corporate jets littering the tarmac at Denver like a bad case of measles,
something's
dying time is near.
Something is going on. And again, what's the timetable?
The timetable?
Yeah.
I think in terms of what I'm looking at, for me it's always been, for all the years I've come on your show, I've always said the same thing. 2012 is the warm-up band, the headline act is 2013. Whatever's going to pop, it is going to pop this year. If nothing happens this year, which would just plumb tickle me to death, then at that point we can say, all right, maybe we were lucky and it's a benign flyby. We've only had a bit of disruption and we'll get through this and things are going to be calm.
At least this
But
time.
on the other hand, it could be, by the time we finish this year, we're going to see all kinds of havoc that's going on. I mean, look at the financial system of the world. Doesn't it look more like a bunch of guys running around with duct tape?
Oh, yeah. And people are acting weird.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got some kind of gravitational pull on people. I don't know. Or primarily water.
I think people are sensing it. I think this is a deep-rooted fear I think that's what I'm finding. And this is news for me. When I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, we have something interesting to look at. And guess what? You can go look at it with us too, and you can see it live. And people don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. There's that, it triggers this massive fear response in them. And, they start babbling with trivia and they get angry if you want to discuss it and they storm off and they don't want to deal with it. But the fact is, it's there and I'm seeing it every day. And it defies logic as to why people don't want to look at it, but they do. I think folks are sensing it. For example, the government right now, Homeland Security, is running around with MRAPs, all right? These are the vehicles we developed for our soldiers in Iraq.
That's right.
So that the IEDs wouldn't take them out.
They're here.
Well, now they've got them here. I don't know. George, do you know anybody that's got a few 155 millimeter howitzer shells laying around?
I don't think so. And they got 2,700 of these vehicles, Marshall. We're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM, and we'll take phone calls with you. We'll be back. Okay, this hour we'll take your phone calls with Marshall Masters as we talk about Planet X. I've got a few more questions for him, then we'll take your calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Marshall Masters with us. Marshall, is there any way that people independently can verify this on their own?
Yes. If they go to YOWUSA.com, or I have a direct link domain, which is twosunsinthesky.com. You'll have all the videos, and I give an explanation. There are the links there for Turrialba. There's also, it's important for folks, there's one that's a local meteorological site that tracks weather conditions there. And what I do as a usual rule is I'll check that first, because if humidity is over 90%, odds are you're just not going to have any good viewing that day. You check that, but then you can do it. But the most important thing, George, is you go and you look at that, and I would say the best time to look at it is from, say, 4:30 to 5:30, and just sit there for an hour and watch it. That's when it sinks in. If it's a still image, you can debunk any still image. If there's one thing ufology has proven, any still image can be debunked. It does, it just depends on how trivial you want to go.
Right.
But it's another thing to sit there and watch it live. This feed that comes out of Turrialba is maintained by a university down there, and there's no archive on the site. The feed is there for the benefit of the folks there that live in the foothills around these volcanoes, and it's continuously pumping high definition imagery. And you sit there for an hour and just watch it. You cannot help but come to the conclusion you are seeing a natural object. People will say it's all kinds of things. And one of the common things is that they'll say it's Venus, all right? And here's something important that people have to understand, because all tonight I've been talking about the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the plane of the system. It's like the equator of the sun that just stretches all the way out to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And if you're looking at the ecliptic, you have to remember we're cockeyed to it. Our planet is tilted on its axis, and so the ecliptic is more like running north and south, and it's going to vary. A good way to think about it is, on the old cars, the windshield wipers were on the top, and they'd sweep back and forth. Well, from the point of view of the camera at Turrialba, that's what's happening with the ecliptic. Now, the point here is when you see the object to the right of the sun, it is north of the ecliptic. If you see it to the left of the sun, it is south of the ecliptic. That's real important. Left is south, right is north. And when you are looking at the imagery, you are looking west by southwest. As a matter of fact, in the supplemental video I did for you guys to announce the show, the opening shot where I have the titles on it is actually a beautiful sunrise shot that Barbara got. And the shadow of the volcano, it was taken at 4 minutes after sunrise, and the shadow gives you exactly nice due west, all right? And so you can see where the camera is oriented. Now, there were 2 cameras at the same volcano site imaging the exact same object. There was one that was there from 2010 through 2011. It was an older NTSC standard definition camera. It wasn't pointed west by southwest. It was pointed southwest. All right, so it was even looking further below, the equator than the new one is. So, which is the reason why it probably picked it up for very brief periods of time in 2010. So when somebody's saying it's a lens defect, it's an aberration, and all of these things, well, you've got 2 completely different fixed-mounted surveillance cameras using completely different lenses and technologies, and they're both imaging the same doggone object at the same time from the same place. That's the chilly thing about this.
Edgar Casey predicted that the North American continent would be submerged, that it would be drastically altered. Might this planet have anything to do with that prophecy?
I think it is. I think that this is, and not necessarily the object that we're looking at. I'm more concerned about the other object that these guys that we saw in the disclosure videos and Skyview, this one that they're currently observing. And that's the one that's going to have the strong interaction with the sun, but also it has got a huge dust cloud of iron tracking along with this thing. This is a dirty, filthy bunch of rocks coming through. But think back to Exodus. What's the first plague of Exodus? The waters are turned blood red. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Well, go to a brickyard and say, hey, I want some nice red bricks for my chimney. What are they going to do? They're going to take their standard mix, and what do they add to it to give you nice red bricks? iron. Okay? So we have all of this iron that comes in. It falls on, the Earth flies through this, and all of this is going to go into the oceans. It will turn all of the surface waters blood red. That's the reason why for years I have always told people, if you have a well and it's shallow, go deep, go to the artesian water. But also it's going to be dragging all kinds of objects and meteorites with it. So right now and the interesting thing is more people are watching what's happening now and reporting now than ever before. You know, earlier you asked me about the Mayan prophecy. To me, the Mayan prophecy was hugely successful. Hugely successful, because the whole purpose of any prophecy is just make people look at what the heck is happening in the world around them. That's it. That's the whole point of prophecy.
It did that, that's for sure.
Yes. People are looking, and that's the reason why I'm getting new sources of information. People are looking, they're seeing, they're reporting stuff to me. I mean, it takes me hours to slog through email every day. And I'm excited about that, because now that people are looking and they're thinking and they're starting to set things aside and they're starting to prepare. That's the whole thing. For me, that's the whole mission, is survival, and to help people fight for their lives. Because I'll tell you, that's the last thing the elites want. The more of us that would perish in a full shift, the better it suits them. Matter of fact, if we all get posed and they come up out of the bunkers, plant the flag, they know they can repopulate.
They'd love it.
So, yeah, absolutely. It would go straight into their
They
hands.
want to reduce the population anyways, don't they?
Yeah. Perfect eugenics. I mean, think about it. All they have to say is, it's not us.
We
Look,
didn't do
it's
it.
that thing in the sky.
Good point. Let's take some calls here. Let's go to Eric at a anonymous location east of the Rockies. Hello, Eric.
Yeah, Mr. NOORY.
Hi.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you before. I got in with Art back in 2005, so this is another anniversary.
Oh, there you go.
I certainly enjoy your show, and tell Mr. Masters I certainly enjoy his website and all the information. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. If Mr. Masters knows about, from what your guest before was saying, the Vatican telescopes, and specifically the one that's down in Antarctica, and if that was there to monitor Planet X's arrival, was probably why it was built, because to put a telescope like that in such an unforgiving environment, I'd see no other use for it to do it except for that. Number two, I think that since this is the new Pope being elected or whatever today, I think it's the responsibility in a sense for the Vatican to disclose what they know about what might be coming, since they've been monitoring Planet X for a long time. And if any of the listeners might be interested in sending